Hi everyone, I'm Reverend Valerie Lelomari. I'm the founder of Women of Grace UK. I'm an activist. I'm 54 years old. I'm a mother of 3 adorable children and I'm a wife as well. I grew up in West Africa. I had to grow up with my grandmother because I was born to 2 very young parents, so I was whisked off to live with my grandmother. But I was living with one of the families and my grandmother sent words to me to say she wanted to take me on holiday. I was super delighted because I hadn't ever gone on any holiday and this was my grandmother, loved me so much, so I was looking forward to it. I packed my bags, she came and off we went. But I noticed that as we were going the opposite direction to my village. At that time I started to feel butterflies in my tummy, but because it was my grandmother, I was comfortable and I followed her. She took me to a village I had never been, to a house I'd never seen. They opened the gate and a very unfriendly face came through the door. And as soon as we went in, the gate was locked behind me. And then further we went into a hut. When we got into the hut, to the left there was a table with some instruments, some pots, oil, and I thought, oh my God, I'm in trouble. And then to the right was another very unfriendly old lady sitting on the side. So I knew something was wrong. At this point, the door was locked. So I just thought to myself, I wasn't going to make it easy. And I started to fight and kick. I was 16 at that time, but I wasn't like a normal 16-year-old. I was quite skinny. And soon after, the lady put her first foot forward and I was on the floor. At that point, I felt the other lady sit on my chest. It was horrible. It was horrible. I was on the floor. I couldn't breathe. I was struggling. I said to her, and then she told me in our dialect to say, if you stop struggling, it will be over soon. At that point, my bottoms were yanked off and I felt an indescribable pain. And it felt as if they were cutting and cutting and cutting. It just went on and on. And I screamed until I couldn't hear my voice anymore. But at this point, I said to myself, Valerie, you're going to die anyway, so there's no need to struggle. So I just laid there. And what felt like a very long time afterwards, the cutter got up and just covered me with some leaves and a wrapper. And I was left on the floor in my own blood, in the pool of my own blood. And I stayed there. And at that point, I remember vividly, I was looking around the room. I wanted everybody to leave the room so that I could end my life. But my grandmother stood at the door. She never moved. But she was crying and that got me even more confused. I thought to myself, why did you bring me here if you didn't like it? But later on I got to find out that that was tradition and she had no option but to do that. And so soon after I heard a voice in my head saying, you're not going to end like this. I summed up that courage myself. I got up. But that was the beginning of my nightmare. Never wanted to talk about it. So off we went to the village. And then I started to suffer and struggle. I had a series of infections. It was horrible. At some point, I had pus coming out. They had to take me back to the quacks. I went through a horrible time, but I was adamant. I didn't want to speak about it. I suffered mentally, but I was just quiet. And I was determined. I really wanted to make good of myself. I wanted to go to school. I started school a bit late. And then soon after, I went to the university, and then I met my husband who came to visit his sister. And 6 months later, he whisked me back to the UK as his bride. But there was something that happened. I didn't want to go anywhere because I was so scared. I didn't understand the culture. I had never heard anyone talk about FGM, female genital mutilation. No one had spoken about it. So I didn't know where to go. I was scared. I didn't know if I go to tell the doctors I'll get arrested. So I was just at home. I would have infections when I get pregnant and I would lose the babies and I was comfortable at home. Until my husband put his foot on the floor and said, you need to go and seek for help. And so I had to make a deal with him. I said to him, I'm going to go. Don't come with me just in case they arrest me. So I went to the doctors, but I was so surprised that the doctor was so kind. He listened to my story. He now introduced me to the FGM specialist who took over my care. At that point, I felt to myself, oh, if I had known, maybe I should have come to seek for help earlier. But it was at that point that I thought to myself, I need to give back to the community. I need to start looking after the women who are now in the place where I was at that time. I didn't know where to go, and that cost me a lot in my health. So that was the birth of Women of Grace UK, which was born out of my experience. When I had the courage to share my story, I started to live a purposeful life. And then I started to talk to women who were gravitating towards me because they had heard my story. And that gave them a bit of confidence to start talking about their story as well. So we started from being 2 women on Zoom. We went on to 8 women on Zoom. And then the word started spreading. And then the women started to navigate towards Women of Grace. So at that point, it was now registered. We now registered Women of Grace, had a board of directors, and we made it formal. And then we now had a strategy. We have now split Women of Grace into 2. We have the support for the survivors. For me, our paramount is to get the survivors back on their feet so that they can go and impact their communities. Because it said, if you educate one person, you educate the entire village. I have also had the opportunity to speak in the parliament, to give oral evidence in the parliament about female genital mutilation. I've also been whisked to the parliament in Brussels, the European Parliament as well, to go and share my story and talk to them about what we actually do in the UK, how we are curbing female genital mutilation. And again, I had the opportunity to speak in the UN. And I chose to talk about literacy as an important tool in helping the women understand their rights and understanding their bodies. Because if you're not educated, you will not know your rights, you cannot speak. And that was very humbling for me. Looking at myself from where I have come from as that slave girl to go up to speak in the UN, that was really, really overwhelming. And guess what? What broke the camel's back was when I received the letter that I was going to be awarded an MBE. I must have read that letter like 20 times. First of all, I thought it was a scam. And I looked at it again. I was so scared. And the biggest part of it was I was not allowed to tell anyone. So I was dying in silence. But I made sure that every day I went back under my pillow to look at that letter. That was a very humbling experience. But for me, I'm not excited that I've been given an MBE. I'm excited that the voices of these women that we advocate for is finally being heard in top places like this. So this MBE is really not for me. It's for those women that we look after, those broken women who are hiding behind the scenes because of the shame and the stigma. That MBE is dedicated to them.